Okay, so I think we're up to the start time, so I think we should proceed, and then others will join as they log in, I'm sure. So welcome everyone to this M11 Medtech Forum. It's an initiative that started, I guess, several years ago now, between Harlow Council and then with some input from myself and from Gino Martini, who you'll hear from towards the end of tonight's program. And really about saying, well, what was happening at that point in and around Harlow. So there were some companies leaving, but also some uncertainties about what the economic development strategy would be for life sciences and what would help. But over those several years, lots of things have been announced and changed, not least the announcement of Public Health England coming to Harlow, although it'll have a new name by the time it lands, I guess, the way things are going. Throughout it, though, oddly enough, I think government policy and support for life sciences has stayed very strong. And I think you may see some tweaking of the edges, but from one government and subsequent, it seemed to translate through the life sciences and healthcare are seen as key planks of UK excellence. And that's been borne out actually in some of the research and development around, obviously, COVID. But there's been regulatory changes coming down the track, as we'll hear more about, including around data with GDPR. And then Brexit arrived, which changed the dynamic a fair bit in most people's minds, I guess. It'd be hard to say not to. And then the COVID-19 pandemic, which changed the dynamic even more significantly. I used to think Brexit was a big thing. And then the pandemic struck. So lots of uncertainty created by that. But equally with uncertainty, that brings challenges of how do you respond to that as a business. Whatever walk of life you're in, I think it brings challenges and how to respond when you've got uncertainty. But also it brings opportunity if we get the recovery right and the forward strategy for each of our companies and collectively as a sector right. So against a backdrop of such uncertainty, and certainly one of the questions that's remained throughout this from our perspective has been, how do we best support medtech companies in the east of England, and how do we promote that better and help? But equally, as we go through that, I guess it's been that uncertainty that maybe has held people back on making decisions. But equally, we're seeing huge amounts of investment come in, and we're seeing a huge uplift in interest across the board. So I'm delighted that we're joined this evening and at this event, which is really now led by the UK Innovation Corridor, and One Nucleus is very pleased to be collaborating around it, and obviously because it's close to our ambitions and what we can do for the region. But we're very fortunate to have both aspects of this being looked at, the regulatory pathways in medical devices and in vitro diagnostics, and then also from a legal perspective and what's changing and how could we adapt to that. And I suspect is the case with most things that aren't particularly settled or clear, this may raise some questions as well as answer them, but I'm looking forward to the first questions being answered. And so we have Product Life Group, who are going to talk about the regulatory side, with Paolo and I think Samar first, just setting the scene. And then Alison Dennis from Taylor Wessing, who will lead us through what some of the legal changes and challenges might be, and how to navigate both of those aspects. So without more from me, I'm going to hand over to Samar George from Product Life Group. Samar, over to you.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for this opportunity and for having us. Good evening, everyone. Before I kick off, if we can just go through the slide. Yes, thank you. So here we go. Thank you, David. So if we can go next slide, please. And next slide as well. So this is just an overview. Basically, we prepared the full presentation. So, and if we go to the next slide, please, as well. Thank you. So good evening, everyone, again, and thank you for your time this evening. So as I said, my name is Samar George, and I'm the Business Development Manager at Product Life Group UK. So just to give you a quick glance who we are. So we are a global consulting and outsourcing company. We provide solution and services within regulatory affairs, clinical safety, pharmacovigilance, and quality compliance. We support all the life and the science sector, and our newest approach to our consultancy is basically providing a core context consultancy approach, and that's by analyzing your core activities versus your context activities to maximize your output. And basically one of the other things that we are currently looking at and differentiating, that's by expanding the regulatory affairs into regulatory science. As you might be aware that the regulatory science is really important for quality compliance for collecting the data. That's at a glance, basically who we are as Product Life Group. And then if we can go to the next slide, please. Just to give you a little bit of a background where we started. So we basically started a service provider, or your service provider next door, basically 30 years ago, roughly. And then as you can see throughout the timeline, we have been acquired. We went through different acquisitions as we arrived today. Our latest acquisition was with AXP Pharma, and that was back in October in 2020. It's a PV service provider to basically to be able to expand our capabilities and our global footprint. And next slide, please. And then going into further, just to give you as well a little bit more details about who we are from a global perspective and from a global footprint. As you can see, we are as PLG, we are present in 30 countries, and that's where we are referring in the dark blue. And that's one of our other strategies that we launch is our boost or expansion strategies, where we are increasing our internal PLG staff. And that's basically we're trying to increase that number, which we refer to the 30 countries, where we can expand and be present locally to support all your requirements and activities. However, expand to a certain level, but not too much to be able to be your partner at any time, at any point. And then, as you can see, the light blue, that's the 110 countries that we work through our validated partners to manage and support you globally. And then if I can move to basically our latest updates, as we're looking at this slide at the same time, as I mentioned, we have our latest acquisition with AXP Pharma. That was back in 2020. And looking into 2021, we have furthermore interesting news. We have managed, despite the COVID situation, to open our office in Denmark, and we have opened another office in Mexico to support that hub from that region, and as well supporting our expansion project, and the Boost project, where we are expanding globally, is going through another acquisitions that is basically work in progress at the moment, and that's in the USA, and that's reinforcing and implementing more on the regulatory affairs activities and expanding in the Asia Pacific, and more specifically in India, and that as well for regulatory affairs activities. And that's more or less about PLG at a glance. And then if you have any questions, please feel free. You can reach to myself if you have any other questions. And if you have any other questions to medical device, I will pass it to our expert, Paolo. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samar. So if we can go to the next slide, so we can even just, I will briefly introduce myself. So I'm Paolo Guerra, and I'm leading the Medtech department in PLG. We are just supporting for all the transitioning period for MDR and ABDR as well. So just as a brief introduction of all the main topics and that we are going to touch right now, we will see the main changes that the MDR and IVDR are bringing as the new scenario. The innovation so the regulatory challenge that the MDR and IVDR are bringing. And we can touch some impact from of the Brexit from EU side and UK side as well. And a new point of view. New point of view, it is what we see as a different point of view, the innovation as a scenario, because for real, what we can see, what we are seeing is that the MDR and the VDR are incorporating such a new regulatory pathway to follow in order even to capture such the innovative products and to give it a proper regulatory framework to such innovative products. We will see combined products, even for in vitro diagnostic, there will be the possibility to handle some specific elements with software as a medical device as well. So there is even an interconnection between the two regulations. So they are not properly split out that were for the directives for the medical device one and for in vitro diagnostic one. And then we can share with you some real cases. So we can go to the next slide. Again, next, thank you. So MDR and AVDR main changes. So next one, thank you. Yeah, here we gather the main key data. Sorry. Okay, the main key data is just to give you some elements that we can think about structuring our discussion of this evening. So the MDR is keeping a high level of complexity due to the increasing of the regulation till 123 articles, 17 annexes, and 71 definitions. So slightly the 0.5% more than the directive. Now that this is the main key part, the medical device regulation is it's a proper law. It's not anymore a directive that was falling into this kind of approval state by state in Europe, but this is a proper European law. So anyone needs to follow one that has been put in place. So we will see even later on the timeline. The deadline for transition is May this year, 2021, so has been postponed and shifted due to the COVID impact on the main timelines for even the main players. There are such a good big changes according to the Article 11 fines that defines new procedures for those devices that are incorporating drugs and so on. Notified body will fall into new definition and designation from NDD to MDR accreditation, and we will see the impact on the market. And because even of the Brexit, there is a strong connection to that one. The clinical data need to have a proper clinical consultation scrutiny from notified bodies. So we will see that the clinical data, post-market clinical data needs to be evaluated by proper notified body according to the risk of class. Labeling changes will fall into a new definition according to the UDI implementation, so the unique device identification. We will see that all the main parts and component of the technical documentation, so design, device history file, technical file, quality management system evidence needs to have a strongest evidences during the entire building of the technical documentation. New roles has been raised up according to the definitions of economic operators, so not only manufacturers, but even importers, distributors, authorized representative. We fall in this definition of as economic operators. We may even see later on even the legal aspects with our colleagues. And then the new role of the person responsible for regulatory and compliance according to the Article 15. At the status of today, in any case, just seems that, or today during the last year, so March 2020, only the 70% of manufacturing felt fully prepared to the MDR. Today, we can just mentioning that the percentage is not so higher from the last year. And they, in any case, they do believe that they will have time until the expiry of the CE marking renewed, because we will see that the CE market has been renewed until 2024. That is the last date of expiration of the validity of the CE marking. So all the main notified body has extended all the main certificates covered by a CE marking. Next slide, please. As we may see here, the MDR, so the Medical Device Regulation, entered in force on May 2017, was planned to have the fully applied, so the expiry of the Medical Device Directive at the end of May 2020. However, due to the COVID, has been extended, there was a period of extension of this year, so 2021, and then fully applies on this year, the MDR. We will see on the top part that that there is the possibility to extend all the validity of all the CE market certificates under the MDD till May 2024. That was the main gap that we faced in the previous slide, according to which all the main manufacturers are going to think that they will have more time to align for those kind of products. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. Just to give you some other key data for the IVD regulation, so the one covering the in vitro diagnostic, this is impacting even more the in vitro diagnostic devices than the MDR. So we see that the scope expansion, according to the new definitions of diagnostic services, genetic tests, and so on, there is a greater reclassification of the in vitro diagnostic according even to the global task force document, and then we will have increasing of the level of the risk classified as IVD classified as A, B, C, or D. Changes to the conformity assessment procedures, so there is an expanded involvement of notified bodies, increased performance evaluation and clinical data requirements that will impact for sure massively the manufacturers of in vitro diagnostics. Again, even here, and this is not a pure case, there is the definition of the person responsible for regulatory and compliance that need to take the lead in terms of getting responsible really for putting in place all the main process and procedures for getting sure that all the main products has been produced in compliance with the regulation. Performance evaluation during the entire part of the evaluation of the product, as well, even whenever it has been placed on the market, and the UDI practice, so the unique device identification practice, for the increasing the level of the traceability of the in vitro diagnostics. We will see that even there are some topics not mentioning as key data, but they will be the part of the massive change. So even the post-market surveillance activities has been increased, the technical documentation as mentioned, and other parts. Next slide, please. Just to summarize what has been expressed in terms of involvement of notified body, we see here, according to the level of the risk, from the right till the left side, we see that this is the increasing in the level of the risk. So the A are the most not most critical risk products, IVDs products, and these are the most critical products. The notified body can be involved from the class B or in vitro diagnostic, and this is just to represent that due to the up classification, more than the 80–90% of IVDs will require the opinion of a notified body, so an inclusion of notified bodies for even the evaluation and the declaration of conformity. The adoption of the risk-based approach conception resulted in the covering up the classification of almost the 90% of all IVDs. So this is a massive impact and a massive new activities for all the notified bodies that we will see that need to get increased in terms of number. Differently, there won't be enough enough applications for all the notified bodies. Okay, so next slide. In terms of timeline, today there are not changing from the first timeline set during the last years. So the AVDR entered in force in 26 May 2017 with the MDR. So this is just even according to the main numbers. So the IVDR has been drafted as the 2017-746, and this is the name of the regulation. Again, here there is the same approach for the MDR. So it is possible to keep for at least May 2024 extending the CE marking for all of those IVDRs that today are CE market. And all the notified bodies are mainly following this approach whenever it's possible to extend the CE marking in order to give to the manufacturers the time needed in order to harmonize and to get proficiently and in compliance the transition against the IVDR requirements. Next slide, please. So now we are going just to expand the regulatory challenges in the real market. So what is the real impact of the IVDR and MDR regulations, seeing what the manufacturers and all the main economic operators could face during this period. So next slide, please. Next one. Okay. So just in terms of main changes, we are seeing that there is not only in the scenario the MDR, the AVDR, but even the UKCA. So due to the Brexit, they will be in 2023 in place, or better, is still in place from 1st January of this year, the conformity assessment procedure in order to get in compliance to place compliance product to the MHRA regulations in the Great Britain, and according to this process that is really similar to the CE marking. However, there will be a transitional period from 2021 till 2023 when this will be an obligation for all the main manufacturers, distributors that are based within the UK country. Okay, next slide. In terms of new challenges, we see that, again, we mentioned the person responsible for regulatory and compliance. So the company need to find someone within the organization that is really responsible to place the product into the market. It's really similar to what in pharma is recognized as a qualified person, and the responsibility is mainly essentially the same. We see that a big change is being given according to the Article 117 for those kind of combination of products that previously fallen into the medicinal directive, and the medicinal product directive. Today they will fall into the Article 117, so they will be considered at the last chance as proper medical devices, as combination of both drug solution and a combined medical device as well. So we will see that will fall into the MDR. New regulatory landscape, so there will be new figures according to the two processes, Brexit and what we call even Swixit, that is outstanding. We are seeing that Switzerland is going to have a similar process to get in compliance with the main regulation in Europe. So need to be mentioned which kind of authorized rep will be responsible for all the main manufacturers based in Switzerland. And we will see the new figures of the UK representative recognized by the MHRA. The main impact of the EU MDR and the IVDR today we can face as we see now the drastically reduction of the accredited notified bodies against the regulation. In the past, there were placed at least 60 notified bodies that was designated under the medical device directive. And today, the situation is that we have 19 European notified bodies designated under the medical device regulation that can carry out the conformity assessment of all the main manufacturers in Europe. So a massive impact of the reduction of the 40% of the notified bodies designated. For the in vitro diagnostic, the situation is similar because we had in the past 20 notified body designated under the in vitro diagnostic directive, and today we have only 4. So the situation is drastically similar. Unfortunately, seems that notified bodies needs to have more workforce in order just to carry out all the main assessment procedures in order to satisfy the manufacturers and then at the end the market. Next slide, please. This is just, we set out a slide in order to give a brief evaluation and possible impact of the big change that Article 117 is bringing. So this is just referring to the medicinal products, and as we mentioned, the medical device, so the combined device will be recognized under the MDR, so there will be a massive change for all the manufacturers of combined devices that previously were recognized only under the medicinal product directive, so the 2001/83. Next slide, please. We set out just the massive impact even of the risk-based approach that is has been drafted according to the MDR and as well the AVDR regulation. So the change of the ISO 14971 will impact massively the main risk-based approach that all the manufacturer and the economic operators need to follow. Next slide. This is just to give to the audience a possible approach on how is changing the risk-based approach, even according to those combination of products. So this is just at the level of complexity that how to gather hazard related to use scenarios. This was set out for product delivery systems like prefilled syringes, and we are supporting for delivering a proper risk-based approach that was not properly in the main culture of manufacturers of combined devices. Next one. And then mainly the main core of this is the presentation, that is the Brexit impact, both on the European side and even from UK side. Next slide. Next again. So we will see that the pathway to register medical device and in vitro diagnostic in Great Britain needs to address the UK responsible. So what has been claimed the UK responsible person for the MHRA that need to be identified within the organization and need to be based within the UK territory. Must register all relevant devices with the MHRA in line with the grace period depending on class of medical devices. So the grace period will be from 2021 till 2023 when the UK conformity assessment will be in place. As mentioned below, there will be the practice of the UK CE mark. So UK product mark can be used for central goals, including medical devices that need to be placed in the Great Britain market Britain, so including England, Wales and Scotland. As mentioned, this will be on voluntary basis until June 2023, and then it will be an obligation for all main manufacturers starting from 1st July 2023. And this is there is even a list of approved notified bodies designated within UK, just to give you the picture. Next slide. So just to give you an overview, the Brexit had impact not only on UK with the role of the UK rep and even the UK conformity assessment, but even to have a proper shifting of all the notified bodies that were based in the Great Britain and now need to be based in the European territory and to be designated. Just to give you a main number on the impact, keep in mind that the 30% of all the industry products that have been marketed with the CE marking were made via the UK notified bodies, and all of these need to be or changed or withdrawn. So there is a massive job to be done by all the main UK notified bodies in order to emit CE marking for those to cover those products. As mentioned, the 19 European notified bodies have been designated under the MDR. Previously, we had more than 60 designated notified body under the MDD. Same situation for IVD. Today, we do have only 4 notified bodies. You can check, and we can provide you the link in the notified bodies Nando, so the system that is gathering all the main list of the designated notified bodies. Next slide. In terms of innovation as scenario, so why MDR and EVDR are keeping this main part, and why there is just such an innovation. We have seen the main change regarding the combined devices of the Article 117. We will see that there will be many of these changes. So there are even some other parts that is just thinking about all the innovative products, such as software as medical devices. Next slide, please. Combination of products, digital health. And the trend is to get increases the patent request. So we are facing here that this is just information from the last part of the 2019. However, the number of patents are increasing year by year for medical devices, so for all the medical device manufacturers. So the regulation tends to identify properly all this innovation pathway in its main framework, and then giving a proper shape to a possible pathway to follow to get the real level of compliance for such innovative products. Next slide. Even in the MDR and EVDR as well are mentioned the software or medical device, screening diagnostic systems, telemonitoring that can be handled according to a software, teletreatment, and digital therapeutics. All these parts fall into the recognition as a software as a medical device of the Rule 11 of the MDR. Next slide. This is just to give you an overview. This has been captured with Roche. So seeing software as a medical device, assessing the proper risk for the right path to follow for consumers. So what we could face during the next years is that the software is going to drive all the main solution for digital health. And according to that, the NDR already identified several classes of the risk of the software. There was already this kind of definition in the past, but now it's even more detailed and stronger, especially for all those aspects related to clinical trials, post-market clinical follow-up, that belongs more to only the medical device culture. But again, today software is proper medical device too. Next one. Next slide. Sorry, Tony. Product life is part of AIT, so we are supporting all the main partners in order even to just getting beneficial both the parties from our perspective and from a manufacturer's perspective to provide the strongest and the more reliable solution adherent to what the regulation is asking to the market and to the main partners. So we can see that in future, all the main regulation could see just a beneficial, even this partnership in order just to leverage on the prices and the standard prices in order to get a solution being marketed and deployed to the market. Next slide, and I do believe that I've almost done. So we have some real cases. We can just mention briefly some cases, but we can pass through briefly to some slides. Next slide.
Sorry, Paolo, maybe we can just limit to one case study and we move on.
Absolutely. So there is just one auto-injector. So we are supporting for an auto-injector that is a medical device with a medication cassette. And this is a new challenge for us. It is real, it's already placed in the market, and we are supporting and gathering all the main experience for this challenge, because this has been set out as initially as a combined device under the directive of medicinal products, and now it is for real medical device. So we are handling and registering this product as a medical device, just as a main case. I have done, so we can just open I can just pass the ball to the next speaker.
Thank you, Paolo. There's so much information to cover. You know, we could have spent a whole day on some of these, but I think you've given a very good overview and heads up of what to expect next, I think, or at least maybe to anticipate what challenges we've got coming and what's changing. So that's been great, and we'll come back for some questions after the next presentation, if that's okay, because I think some of these will dovetail well. So with that, our trusty assistant, David, I think, is running logistics. If you'd like to share Alison's presentation, then I'd like to welcome Alison Dennis as the partner from Taylor Wessing, who's going to complement that with who the key players are and the key changes around navigating the legal side of commercializing medical technologies.
Great.
Welcome, Alison.
Thank you very much, Tony, for that kind introduction. So I'll just wait for my slides to come up. But while they come up, I'll just let you know that I'm co-head of the International Life Sciences and Healthcare Sector Group at Taylor Wessing. My practice focuses on regulations and transactions in the life sciences sector, and for very many medical device companies. I work for small startups in the digital health space, but also some of the biggest players in the market for medical devices. And my colleague Adrian Tatungi is also on the line, and he's based in our Cambridge office. Adrian, I don't know if you want to say hello. Not sure.
I will if I can. Hello, everyone. We're waiting for your slides, Alison.
Just waiting for my slides to come up. Yes. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Adrian. So I'm going to make the second half of this slightly fun, in that a lot of the work that we're doing at the moment and that we're seeing at the moment is around economic operators. So MDR in particular being the regulation that will very soon be fully enforced from the end of May this year, has really changed the landscape when it comes to the companies that are involved, indeed, in the supply chain for medical devices. And consequently, the relationships between those companies have changed, and they need to be documented and regulated appropriately to meet the requirements, the new requirements, which are significantly greater and actually very different from what we are used to. This has come as a bit of a surprise for some companies, and I was interested to see how many companies don't feel quite prepared in Paolo's presentation. But the regulatory side and the piece in terms of upgrading all the systems and the QMS and the PMS is one thing, but contracts are another, because actually as part of the quality management system and of your post-market surveillance system requires keeping tabs on various other players within the market. So I have written this from the perspective of this being a play, and the stage on which everyone is acting is actually MDR. So slightly different from usual presentations. We go to the next slide. So I'm going to just talk through economic operator roles and understanding those relationships, because it really is about controls and engagement with each other, passing information backwards and forwards. Talk very briefly at the UK responsible person that Paolo did mention, and I'm also going to talk about the trouble with Northern Ireland. I won't spend too long on that, but it is causing quite some issues with Brexit and these relationships as well. So do you want to, yeah, and the next one. So if we go to economic operators. So let's just set the scene for who the actual characters are in this play on the set of MDR. So the manufacturer, the legal manufacturer, has various relationships. So if the legal manufacturer is outside the EEA or Northern Ireland, so that includes the UK, they have to have an authorised representative, and companies will be used to having authorised representatives, although UK companies will not be used to having authorised representatives. That authorised representative has to be established in the EEA or Northern Ireland, because Northern Ireland is, for regulatory purposes, still within the EU, which is what gives us some of the troubles that we have there. The legal manufacturer also has to appoint an importer, and this is a new role, and the importer has to be established in the EEA. And if the legal manufacturer is outside the UK, so if in the US, China, Japan, they must also in the EU, they have to appoint the UK responsible person who has to be established in the UK. And then legal manufacturer might have other relationships. They might have distributors with whom they have a legal relationship, and therefore terms need to go into the contracts with the distributor. And there might be many distributors. There may be distributors along the line. So there are an awful lot of players in this play, and we have to get to grips with each of their roles, what they have to do, and what their relationships are with each other. So if we go to the next slide, please. So our central character, I hesitated to say this is the hero of the piece, but the central character is certainly the legal manufacturer. And the legal manufacturer has the control over all of the other relationships, but not all of the control. One might say that actually the real controller here will be the competent authorities and also the notified body. But for supply chain purposes, the central character is the legal manufacturer. And for the purposes of this talk, I'm not going to go through the lists of obligations which are set out in MDR, because you're all perfectly capable of reading them. I'm actually going to talk about everything that's not in there. So what does the legal manufacturer need to do? Well, they need to ensure that any other economic operators who they're engaged with, whether it's their importer or distributors, for example, that the quality of their operations matches up to the legal requirements. And in some ways, the legal requirements are relatively straightforward. Keep the product in good condition so it doesn't deteriorate. But what happens if the product does deteriorate because of the way it's been stored by a manufacturer, by an importer or a distributor? Well, then you're going to have issues which may get raised by your notified body or by a competent authority, and the legal manufacturer is going to get stuck with that, even if at the end of the day it turns out that it wasn't their fault, it was one of their economic operators in their supply chain. So the contract needs to set out the list of qualities that need to be complied with, and there are now extensive guidelines on that, and we're starting to write pretty extensive quality procedures into distribution agreements for these types of distributors. Another piece is the post-market surveillance system. Now, post-market surveillance is different now in that it used to be very, very much reactive. If there was a problem, you'd sort of scratch your head and try and work out where it came from. Now, manufacturers are required to be much more proactive and to gather data regularly. And in order to do that, they're going to need their other economic operators in the supply chain to actually go out and, for example, raise questions with customers, give them questionnaires, ask them how the patient experience has been, ask them if there are any problems. And so they're going to need terms within their contracts asking them to provide that information and to send that on to customers and to patients. Another really important right is the ability to audit. One would normally expect to see an ability to audit in sort of quality agreement, certainly for supply of an actual product that's been sub-manufactured. We're now looking at that really with the supply chain. And that's so that the manufacturer can be comfortable that, for example, there aren't rodents running around the warehouses, and that all the procedures, that there are SOPs, for example, for returned goods, that they're not just being dusted off and put back on the shelf and resold, that they're being properly checked over, all that kind of thing. So you need to be able to audit that because, as I said earlier, the comeback is on the manufacturer if things go wrong. Another major piece that we are really quite hot on is ensuring that economic operators don't talk directly to the competent authorities. This wasn't an issue before because the competent authorities had no right to talk to other economic operators, and they didn't have an obligation, those economic operators, to provide information to competent authorities. That has changed, and basically, manufacturer doesn't want its distributor, for example, saying, oh yeah, all the devices are really defective. Yeah, definitely, don't want to be selling those anymore. That conversation we do not want to be had. And whilst a manufacturer can't prevent an economic operator, or another one, basically going to the competent authority if they think the law has been broken, we can put provisions into the contract saying, well, at least if you're going to talk to them, you'll do it on our terms, unless we're breaking the law. And finally, of course, complaints procedures, which have always been done fairly informally, at least with distributors. Those are now going to have to be more formal, and obviously data privacy provisions will apply, and we are putting those into the contracts that we are drafting. And finally, subcontractors. Obviously, one distributor may sell to a sub-distributor who sells on to a sub-distributor. All of these things that I've discussed, you want all of those distributors to be fully engaged with all of them. Manufacturer needs to make sure that everyone is playing by the same rules. So if you want to go to the next slide. So this is one set of scenarios for the contracts that the manufacturer may have. One with their authorized representative who's performing actually quite a legal role. One with their importer, bringing the goods into the EU, and one with a distributor, and the distributor having sub-distributors. If we go to the next slide. Another alternative is actually that the importer effectively takes title to the goods, sells them on to another distributor and onto sub-distributors. But again, the manufacturer needs to make sure that there's a flow through of all of those obligations so that everyone in the chain is caught by them and the manufacturer can enforce against all of them. Next slide, please. So authorized representative, as I've said, this is a fairly well understood concept, very much the first frontier for regulators because they're established in the EU for overseas manufacturers, including UK ones now. And so that's the first port of call where there are issues with their products. A new provision is that the authorised representative has 100% product liability jointly and severally with the manufacturer, which is a pretty big deal, which means of course they'll be putting their fees up, but hey, everyone's going to be putting their fees up with the requirements of MDR, so this is just another one. And the authorised representative has to have their own person responsible for regulatory compliance, who will need to be cited at or close by where the authorised representative is based. Next slide, please. So a completely new character for that came in under MDR and IVDR is the importer, and this one is giving clients quite a lot of headaches, stroke an awful lot of headaches. And the main reason is that the importer has to be established in the EEA. And previously, foreign manufacturers would just send their goods in, and they could send them directly to a hospital. They could send it to 60 different distributors. But there are two important points for the importer is that they have to engage in the placing on the market, which is a legal term under the EU Blue Guide, which is about 60 pages long, and it's quite a complicated concept, but they're the ones that have to basically make the product available on the market. But secondly, their details have to be on every device. And if you've got 60 distributors, they do not want to have to put their name on the devices. Equally, the manufacturer doesn't have to sort through all its devices and stick different names on according to which distributor they're selling to. And of course, hospitals don't want to have to put their names on, if they're not an end user. So there are all sorts of issues with this. And so we're having to set up various companies within the EU for clients so that they can have their own importer, and they can then put the details onto the product sort of at the manufacturing stage. Because I can tell you, sticking stickers onto vast numbers of medical devices is not a way anyone wants to spend their time. It's much easier if the manufacturer can do that in the actual manufacture of the product and the labeling. Next slide, please. So when I say reluctant players, our distributors, many of whom were just like this, a warehouse. Yeah, we sell medical devices, we fill our warehouse up and we take orders and then we send them on. And that was pretty much it. And obviously they took a cut from all the devices that they sold. But now they're actually going to have to verify regulatory compliance for each of the devices that they sell. And while they don't have to go through the technical dossier in detail, they are going to have to at least check that the paperwork is in order and that they've got the right paperwork. And they have, as I said, obligations directly to competent authorities, which is completely new to them, and engaging with them so that they participate in the PMS system and actually have a quality management system for the operation of their warehouse is one of the things that needs to go into their contracts, which are now much longer than they used to be, much more complicated, and some companies are struggling to get distributors to sign up to these new obligations. But the fact is that the manufacturers need to control the supply and ensure that quality is maintained throughout the supply chain. Next slide, please. So our bit part actor, I say bit part because they're only based in the UK, UK responsible person, another set of requirements to be complied with. So we go to the next slide. This has been a bit of a moving feast with the MHRA changing the guidance even since this came in on the 1st of January. If you look at the guidance now, it was changed again in February. So we're all sort of struggling to keep up because they keep changing how this should be done. But essentially, it's a registration role. It doesn't have the liability that an authorised representative has. It did in the first set of guidance that came out last year or the year before, but anyway, they've taken that away for the time being. And they fulfil the role of communication. So the thing that we are doing for UK RPs and for manufacturers appointing them is drafting contracts or reviewing contracts. And what I do see is regulatory groups who are offering this service, who are insisting on doing things like reviewing the entire set of technical documentation on an hourly rates basis, which yes, I know lawyers charge on an hourly rates basis, but the technical documentation does not need to be reviewed in full by the UKRP, and there are all sorts of nasties in the contracts that I'm seeing from some of these groups that are offering these services. So I would certainly be extremely wary. And in fact, it's got to the point where I've just said, don't go with this service, because actually it's not a very difficult role at all. It's a relatively straightforward for the time being. One thing to note is that at some point in the future, contact details for the UKRP for AIMD and IVDs is going to have to go onto the packaging for those products, but not for other general medical devices. Next slide, please. The trouble with Northern Ireland. So really the clash of, well, it's a perfect storm really, MDR and Brexit, and Northern Ireland being in Europe but also in the UK at the same time, is extremely difficult. And we've all heard that I think the EU is now suing the UK for not complying with what is agreed to, and what is agreed to is actually incredibly difficult to comply with. And so I'm just going to sort of explain one issue that we're seeing. So if we go to the next slide. So I'll just set the scene slightly here. So from the 26th of May, in Northern Ireland, they will be following MDR. And so products that are placed on the market under a CE mark in Northern Ireland are on the basis that Northern Ireland is in the EU for regulatory purposes. Whereas in the UK, you can also use the same device with the CE mark, but it's on the discretion of the MHRA. And it's a discretionary basis until 30th of June 2023. And because it's discretionary, if the MHRA looks at a device and says, for Great Britain, actually, I don't like that one, they can take it off the market because the whole thing is at their discretion. They're not allowed to do that for Northern Ireland. So they have to just roll with whatever the EU has provided. So if a notified body has certified it as safe, then the MHRA can't do anything about it in Northern Ireland. So that is one major distinction. And so we have the UK CA mark, but we also have the UK NI mark. Query what the use is of that, because every device being sold in the market in Northern Ireland for, as far as we know going forwards, has to have a CE mark on it as well. And if it says UK NI, you can't sell it in the rest of Europe. So why, for a population of 1.9 million, would you do that? Don't know. Anyway. The importer role obviously applies to goods going into Northern Ireland, and if they're coming from Great Britain, even if they have come from the EU and already been placed on the market in the EU, they are said to be coming through Great Britain. And so, for example, any major supermarket that has a box of plasters that was manufactured in Europe, placed on the market in Europe, and is then sent to their warehouse in the UK, they then send that, or even if it hasn't been placed on the market in Europe, they then send that into Northern Ireland. That box of plasters has got to have an importer name on it, and query who the importer is, because they need to be established in Northern Ireland or somewhere in Europe, and they need to be on the box. So if we go to the next slide, please. I'll click through that one. We'll go to the next slide after that. So for retailers who are selling, some of them are selling sort of 15,000 medical devices a week in Northern Ireland. They have got to label all of those medical devices just for that sale in Northern Ireland. So this is why this is incredibly impossible to do. And that's, I suspect, why the government has perhaps realised its own folly in agreeing what it agreed for Northern Ireland, and why it is so difficult to comply. Next slide, please. So, in fact, we have a free trade deal with Europe, and there is a UK traders scheme. That scheme only applies to customs duties, and it doesn't apply to the regulatory requirements. And so for all those products in Northern Ireland, you still have to comply with the EU rules and add that importer, even though the goods are not going to go anywhere else outside of Northern Ireland, if they're going to a supermarket that only exists in Northern Ireland and not in the rest of Ireland. So essentially, Northern Ireland is going to find that it has to come to the UK to buy a box of sticking plasters. Next slide. And that's it. I'm open to questions when that's appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. I think many headaches to come is the impression I'm getting from that, in a sense, which you know, life isn't boring when you're trying to navigate laws that haven't even been written yet, I guess. if you're the legal advisor, I'm guessing that's a bit of a tough call, to be fair.
Yes, it is.
But I think now we can open it up to questions. If people want to put them in the chat box, I'll try and bring them in where I can. I guess one, just to start off with, from my perspective, and maybe I'll come to Alison first and then Paolo, see yourself. I'm just wondering, in a sense, we're talking here obviously about that issue of Brexit and the relationship with Europe. But if you're looking at the UK and the innovation corridor is putting this event together, its strategy is to how do we grow the cluster in the corridor, but also in the UK and the Medtech base. What do you think the impact's going to be on non-EU companies thinking about investing into the UK in medical technology? Are they going to think, no, the UK is just too difficult because of the relationship with Europe? Or will they see it as maybe now easier to deal with because it's under its sole control? I don't know.
So I think that if it was when we were under the directives, it was often the case that US companies would put their products on the market in Europe first. And the reason that they did that is that the regulatory pathway was easier. And I often talk to lawyers in the US, and they are basically saying, well, that's not the case anymore. We put our devices on the market in the US first, and that is because under MDR, the complexity is so vast and the pathways are so uncertain and so lengthy that we will have to go with the US first. And so the challenge, I think, and I have challenged the MHRA with this, the challenge really for the UK is to find a pathway that makes us easier for companies than the US system, so that they do come to the UK. Because essentially, if you can get companies to, for example, trial their devices in the UK and then put them on the market quickly in the UK, we'll end up with more research, more science, and more products. But if we don't achieve that, if the MHRA, for example, just does copy and paste for MDR, then companies will, and they are already saying, we're not coming to the UK. Simple as that. So I think it is really on the MHRA to realise that they have got to have the simplest possible regulatory pathway. For example, doing MDSAP, so that if you've got your quality management system under MDSAP, you can place your product on the market in the UK and the US and Australia and Canada. Then that is one obvious thing. But I think just having having notified body system that is far more accessible than the European one. I think that's where the European system is about to, if it hasn't already, fall over. It will fall over. And I suggested to the MHRA that they should actually be more involved and engaged and provide scientific advice like the FDA does, that companies can then rely on. Currently, you put your device through the system and it may be 10 months before you know, actually, we're not going to certify this, you need a bit more data. It's not a helpful system. So we should change that.
Paolo and Samar, I don't know from a PLG perspective what you're seeing with your clients in terms of appetite.
Yeah, so I can take the opportunity to reply, and then I will leave even Samar to express her opinion. So from what we are seeing today is exactly as our colleague was mentioning, that there is in any case the fulcrum of the quality management system according to the ISO 13485, especially the 2016 edition, is the real center of the main level of compliance. And all the other regulations, so the MDR, the FDA is even pointing to the ISO 13485. There is already in place the medical device single audit plan, as mentioned, so the MDSAP. MHRA is mentioning several times the CE marking as the first brick to follow, just to have the conformity assessment for whenever there will be the proper UK CA. So at today, what we are seeing is that non-European and non-UK manufacturers in any case tend to try and to find a way in order to harmonize by themselves, so to have some deviations and for giving the level of compliance to both the MDR and the MHRA at the same time. So what we are seeing as today as a consulting company is that they are asking us if we are capable to deploy this level of compliance with both the MDR and the MHRA regulation at the same time. So, and the two main regulations are really drafted on the same basis, having again at the fulcrum the quality management system that main of the times need to get based on the ISO 13485, or better needs, because that is the one dedicated for medical devices.
Excellent. So we've got some questions in the chat box, and if I can just ask, when I come to those questions, people to unmute themselves and or switch their camera on if they wish. So Raj Sahar, you had a couple of questions coming in there from what you were watching. Do we have Raj?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
go for it.
I think the whole process appeared to be more bureaucratic, and the manufacturers have been taking all the responsibilities from Alison's presentations, I gathered, as well as from the Paolo's point of view, that basically when the distributor distributing and the manufacturers taking their responsibilities, I find it that it will be very hard. And then two prongs regulatory measures they have to do. One is the UKCA as well as the CE. So I feel that it will be a difficult scenario, and I'm not sure how EU and the UK, and then another prong is the Northern Ireland, which is on the regulatory contract, lies within the remit of the EE. So it is going to be challenging, and I do not know there is any easy solution to it, and how that will have an impact on the innovation, manufacturing, and bureaucracy actually hinders the progress. So that is first part of the questions. And the second part is the patenting and intellectual property rights, and how those could be also protected. So these are the two questions. Obviously, I do not know who is going to take and explain that a little bit more, and how to make the life of the manufacturer easier.
Yeah, so I don't know, Alison, if you like to start first replying.
That's all right, you can go ahead.
Yeah. So from our perspective, what we are facing today is that the MDR process, so assessment process, is really similar to the MHRA drafted one for the conformity assessment. The only, as mentioned even by Alison, that really the different part is the UK rep. So you need to identify properly a UK responsible person for just being responsible for a full set of activities and responsibilities. So from a non-EU manufacturer perspective, even from such an innovative one, there are even what we can mention, especially during the COVID, that this kind of emergency procedures has been applied. So there's nothing to just, I may say, there is nothing that is revealing us that for sure we will have a high level of complexity to handle, but even the possibility to have a kind of, I may say, a fast lane for those kind of innovative products, such as we may say even COVID tests, IVD tests, and so on. There is this kind of opportunity, just that we needed to handle timelines in order to get proficiency within the market by demonstrating at the same time the level of compliance according to some legally deviations that the MHRA and even the MDR is just making possible. According to the patent, I didn't get the question related to the patents. So
I suggest that my colleague Adrian might answer the patent question.
Okay. Okay. That's
just,
it.
very briefly, Raj, the patent question, I think, is quite straightforward in the sense that Brexit hasn't had much of an impact on the patent system. So it's business as usual, really, for patenting. The European Patent Convention and the EPO were nothing to do with the EU. So the exit from the EU hasn't affected your ability to get international patent protection. The SPC system on the therapeutic side has changed, but since SPCs are not, except in very, very unusual circumstances, available for devices, that hasn't really impacted in the devices sector. So I think the bottom line is business as usual on the patenting side.
Well, at least that's something you're saying, something business as usual, which is not a bad place to be. Maybe she'll move on before it goes downhill from here on next time. So Gino Martini, this is a question from you. If you're wanting to come on screen, join us.
Yes, and I'm struggling with a very bad tooth abscess. I must apologise. So if I'm slurring my words, yeah, it's obviously with Ireland and Northern Ireland. What's stopping? So can Northern Ireland trade with Southern Ireland because technically they're part of the EU? I mean, what's the situation there?
So essentially, products that go into or in Northern Ireland have to be compliant with EU law in order that they can freely transfer to Southern Ireland and the rest of Europe, but mainly so that they can go to Southern Ireland and they can go backwards and forwards without there being a border. So that's the reason for Northern Ireland being in the EU. But of course, Northern Ireland, as we've found, is actually set up so that most of its products, its supermarkets are British supermarkets that stock their shelves from Great Britain. And they don't stock up from, I'm sure they do stock certain things up from Southern Ireland, but most of the stocking is done from the UK, and so that is causing an issue for products that are consumed in Northern Ireland. So they're not getting all the food products coming through, and medical products as well.
Interesting.
Thanks, Alison. Mark Eccleston was intrigued by your comment.
Yeah, 1 second, start the video. Hi everyone. Yeah, so we've been following the basically the general discussion for a while now. And I've been at a few meetings where there's been basically comments from groups like yourselves basically saying that the NHS are just not going to adopt anything that isn't certified under either IVDR, which is my personal interest, or I assume it applies to the devices as well. Basically, because those IVDs or devices will become non-compliant relatively quickly. So even if there's a rush, I've seen companies rushing to get basically certification under IVDD, thinking that that gives us 2 years, but actually it doesn't give you 2 years because nobody will buy it if you don't have IVDR, for example. I'm just wondering if there's any thoughts on that, or any kind of a feeling, if there's any understanding from the audience on that.
So it's certainly an issue that in vitro diagnostics under the directive have about 10-15% products that are certified by a notified body, which basically means that they fall off a cliff. All of those products that will need a notified body come 26th of May next year basically will not be able to be sold unless they are certified under MDR, and 85% will require certification under MDR. And so I can see that particularly where hospitals are buying capital equipment, if that's not going to be able to, well, it will be able to be used because it's only the selling part that's the issue. But they will need to make sure that, for example, the assays that are sold to them after that works on the equipment that's sold to them after the 26th of May next year are also compliant. So you can see why the NHS is taking that position.
Maybe this is what we are facing is due mainly to the fact that there will be this there is just the common pathway to follow for the MHRA, but according even to the timelines, they want to be for MDR and IVDR. There are two separate regulations. So what we are facing is that mainly the majority of our customers from that they're producing and manufacturing IVDs are asking to get the CE marking as soon as possible, whenever it's possible, to get in place a quality management system to obtain the CE marking and so on, because we will face during the next years the raising up of the level of attention and the level of the risk. So this means that all the IVDs need to be reclassified. So this could be mainly an interpretation of why NHS could ask like this evidence right now, or in any case could raise up the level. This makes absolutely sense.
And is there a feeling that that applies more widely in Europe? I mean, I know we've had this question about Northern Ireland, but for me, if you're a company in the UK and your biggest worry is Northern Ireland, then you've got much bigger worries, right? Because you should be focusing on European or wider markets. So, and is there any information or any feeling about the wider market in terms of we're just not going to look at it unless your IVD are compliant?
So
it's a reimbursement question, I guess.
Yeah, no, what I can just mention is that today the classification that I showed, so A, B, C, D, is according to the Global Harmonization Task Force. So makes sense to have this kind of classification, and was strange to have a different one according to the IVDD. So that's it. So mainly we can think about having a global harmonized system like it is even for the NDR as well. So now it could be possible to think even on a more structured than I may say a globalized system in a positive way, for sure. Just knowing that this would open the doors for manufacturers in order to reduce the gaps to have some compliance level and regulatory certification all around the globe.
Thanks, Paolo. There's nothing more on that one for the moment. Press Deborah Guest, if you'd like to join us and bring your question in. Do we still have Deborah?
Tony, she says that she can't come off mute. It's too noisy. Do you want to read her question out?
I'll read the question then. Yeah, okay. So Deborah's asked, is it possible to get a UK CA mark now, or are notified bodies still working out what is needed for it?
So yes, it is possible to get a UK CA mark, and BSI announced not that long ago, yay, we've done our first one. So I haven't seen any others. Paolo, have you seen any others? I mean, that's the only one I've seen.
Honestly, not. I know that there is a list of designated notified bodies, but no one seen right now. So, yeah.
So my fear is, though, that if you get a UK CA mark now, given that they have yet to write the law on medical devices, and they are consulting on that, and they will have them written, and we will have new laws by the end of the year, is it going to be like the directives to the regulations where there's no grandfathering and you're going to have to apply again? Don't know. And they don't know the answer either, because they don't know what the laws are going to be. I mean, it's complete blank sheet at the moment as to what those laws are going to be. But if they are very different, and if they are much more complicated, then I think anyone applying for a UK CA mark now may well find that they have to start again.
Excellent. So there was a follow-on to the question, and thanks for pointing out, Adrian. So I think I've committed that sin of not reading the question fully before starting to answer it. But I'll try and do a better job on this one. So the second part was for a new product coming to the market to be used in the EU and the UK before July the 1st, 2023. Is it still okay to enter the UK via the CE mark route, or is that just for existing CE marketed products?
Any, as long as you've got a valid CE mark, it doesn't matter how you got it.
Okay.
Yeah. Just need to address someone, to appoint someone of the UK responsibility, so to identify someone as UK rep. That is the main part. If I may.
Okay. I mean, just in sense of it sort of occurred to me when Mark was asking his question about how the NHS is going to respond, and it sort of, I guess there's a challenge there for MHRA to be innovative and creative and be good, or be better, I guess, in that sense. than the EU maybe. But in terms of, we're still coming out of the pandemic. The NHS has been under immense pressure across all departments. Do you think there's going to be an issue with actually selling the product and market uptake of new products just because they won't have the bandwidth?
So the NHS is always a difficult entity to get new products into. They never seem to have bandwidth. Doctors are always busy, nurses are always busy. It's immensely difficult to get products into the market. And I think if the UK PLC is going to be an attractive place for medical device manufacturers, they've got to solve that. They've been working on solving it, and they keep having committees and groups looking at this, and they never quite get there. But actually, I mean, there are some very good groups in NICE, for example, that are very good at, and they have 4 different groups, just to make it slightly confusing, that you can go to get get advice on getting onto the market and get them to give you a green flag so that you can go in with that. But I do think that is something they're going to have to solve. It was a problem already. I'm sure you're right, Tony. It'll be even more of a problem afterwards. Although, who knows? It's amazing what they've been doing. Maybe they'll all think, gosh, I no longer have 25,000 COVID patients. I've got some time to look at some new products. But
well, I guess they may have introduced new systems to cope with the increased volume, and therefore, when the volume's down, that efficiency will kick in.
Yeah.
So, and Paolo, are you seeing your clients engaging in seeking that scientific advice early in the process of innovation?
Yeah, today what we are facing is that they claim just an increasing level of requirements regarding more let me say the pre-market stages, so the clinical and especially the clinical trials, and where the MDR and AVDR are putting really a high level of emphasis, according even to the increasing level of risk of both MDR and IVDR. So needed to be reassessed for some of the manufacturers, really the clinical protocols for those that were recognized as low risk devices. And it seems to me, but I'm even asking confirmation that MHRA intends to adopt the same approach. So however, it seems that there is even, but now it's just in a kind of testing phase, something similar to the emergency approval procedure that is now quite common for MDR and for the FDA regulation. And then we will see that maybe for such innovative products need to get demonstrated high level of impact, social impact in terms of in order just to get this fast track of approval. But today what we are facing is that there is a high level of complexity due mainly to the need of having a proper clinical protocols according to some strict rules so that it cannot be overtaken.
And I guess this is more of a general, I'm conscious of time, but I'll ask this sort of more general question, I guess. We saw challenges everywhere around supply of PPE. We've seen supply of lab supplies has come up recently, and I hear members saying, we don't make enough of these things in the UK if you're based here and you need plastic tips for your pipettes in the lab. Do you think the impact of the pandemic, and I guess it probably relates a bit to Alison's part about the sort of complexity within the supply chain and distribution. Do you think you'll see supply chain shortening as a result of the pandemic, and there will be a desire to have, not all of it, because there's a very good reason why globalization had some benefits. But do you think we'll see a shortening of that supply chain in people's thought process?
Yeah, well, I mean, a shorter supply chain is always good if you're trying to keep control. And so we've seen, for example, very short supply chains for pharmaceuticals, where companies have tried to keep the grey market out and parallel importers out. And there was a fashion 10 to 15 years ago where the pharmacies were going direct to, or the manufacturers going direct to pharmacy. Literally no middle person at all, because they knew if they sold it to the pharmacy that it wasn't going anywhere else. And so yes, I think with MDR, IVDR, the need to keep control over your products and keep control over your distributors and their activities with competent authorities, that it may well see a shortening of those supply chains just in order to maintain that control.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay, well, I'm conscious we're into the last few minutes. I'm going to give some apologies for Gino, who was going to close out, but as he mentioned, he's suffering with some pain at the moment, and I think he's succumbed to the pain and gone off to get some treatment. So with that, I'd just like to thank our speakers from this evening and for helping us deliver this. I mean, lots and lots of complex things that people are having to deal with. You know, commercializing innovation, I don't think has ever been easy, and it certainly isn't getting any easier. Although we know how important it is. So thank you for sharing those views. I would encourage anybody to get in touch, probably via Dave Burrows as the organizer of the meeting. Should you have any follow-up questions, which I'm sure the speakers will be more than happy to engage in and follow up with you. Just to mention a few housekeeping or good news things, I guess, in a sense. Given this was started with Julie Houston and colleagues at Harlow Council, then it was really pleasing this week to hear about Renesis as the first tenant to move into the Nexus building on Harlow Innovation Park. So it's always good to see the first tenant come onto a new park, and hopefully we'll see many more growing in the corridor. I thought it was interesting really about all the pressures of commercializing, and yet what I hear more and more, I guess frequently, is how do we access good people and good talent, and how important that relates back to indeed the whole skills agenda and economic development. So that certainly features heavy for us as One Nucleus with our Building Life Science Adventures conference coming up in a couple of weeks' time. But also I'd like to flag Alison Fox at Harlow Council is trying to progress the STEM Learning Challenge, which is aimed at 11 to 15-year-olds. And a part of that is to design a medtech equipment. So any employers looking to engage with schools and try and further that STEM agenda and be ambassadors, do please get in touch, again, probably via Dave if you don't have Alison Fox's contact details. And without that, it just remains me to thank you all for your attention. I've been Tony Jones of One Nucleus. I think I still am. And now it's probably time that we finish the day. And thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, David.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Tony.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.